Okay, welcome to part 7 of your notes. We're going to be talking about human impact. In part 6 of your notes, we talked really briefly about rainforests, and how they have poor soil. This is a picture that I've chose to open our session with of rainforests being cut down. Okay, we talked about how rainforests have really poor soil, and maybe you were wondering when I said that, why do they have poor soil if they're so diverse and there's so much life in rainforests? Well, it's basically because the nutrient cycles in the rainforest are so efficient and so fast that all the nutrients get used up before they can really penetrate the soil. You do get the first about 6 to 8 inches of soil that's going to be mostly composed out of dead and decomposing leaves, wood, organic material. Okay, so the first 6 to 8 inches of soil are going to be very rich in nutrients, but because it's a competition of resources, whatever can use those nutrients first is going to be more successful. Okay, for example, since it's going to be more successful, then it's going to grow. So it's like this competition, whoever can get the nutrients first. So trees, one of the things that is very interesting in rainforests and isn't necessarily too good if you have a big storm, but the trees in rainforests typically are going to have very shallow root systems so that they can absorb as much of that good nutritious soil as they can. Okay, the good nutrients that we talked about, those nutrient cycles. Okay, so what happens is people will go in and they will clear out these rainforests, and then they'll try to grow crop because they're trying to make a living, right? So they grow crop, and within about 2 years their crops aren't growing anymore because they've used up that first 6 to 8 inches of the soil, and there's nothing, that nutrient cycle has been broken. There's nothing left to add more nutrients into the soil, so they're left with the bad soil underneath, or the not very nutritious soil underneath. A lot of time, maybe not a lot of times, sometimes rainforests are referred to as wet deserts, which I think is kind of cool. Alright, so learning targets 20, explain how habitat destruction, invasive species, and overexploitation can lead to a loss of species. 21, describe how human population size relates to the impact humans have on the environment. Obviously, the larger your population, the larger the impact. 22, describe the causes of major environmental issues: climate change, ozone depletion, acid rain, eutrophication, biological magnification. We'll talk about all those. Okay, so first of all, biodiversity. We need to talk about what is biodiversity. It is all the organisms in the ecosystem, okay, with all the possible gene variations. That's one of Earth's greatest resources, because remember, the more diverse you are, the more likely you are to withstand some change in the environment. Okay, so having very diverse genes is a really good thing. Some of the threats to this biodiversity are endangered species and threatened species. If you didn't know, endangered species, they are very close to going extinct. Threatened species is, they're in, how to explain it? It's kind of like, think of thunderstorms. So we can have severe thunderstorm warnings and severe thunderstorm watches. Okay, so an endangered species would be like a warning, and a threatened species would be like a watch. Okay, so threats of biodiversity. Habitat fragmentation. So this is when habitats are isolated. When they're isolated, it's difficult for organisms to breed because they can't get to each other. Smaller habitat, you're going to have fewer species. So if you take a look at this picture up here, okay, and your habitat is going to be this forested area in here, and instead of it being all just one big forest, now we have a little part of forest there, we've got a little bit of forest here, a little bit here, a little bit over here, okay, and it's going to be difficult for organisms. Think of all the raccoons or the possums that you see dead on the side of the road. okay, or deer, or whatever. There's a whole slew of things. It's going to be hard for them to cross this open area to be able to reproduce over there. So we're isolating these populations. Okay, biological magnification. We already talked about this with DDT. DDT, if you take a look here in the water, its concentration is at 0.000003 ppm. ppm means parts per million. Okay, so the concentration of DDT in the water is not as high, it's not too high. Okay, but then you've got all these little zooplankton, and the zooplankton are going to be absorbing this DDT along with their food. Okay, and the zooplankton, then the concentration is going to go all up to 0.04. Okay, that's a lot higher than 0.000003. Okay, then small fish are going to eat the zooplankton. That concentration is going to go from 0.04 to 0.5. And then larger fish are going to eat the smaller fish. That concentration is going to jump up to 2 ppm. And then we're going to have some kind of bird come in. And we talked about how this was a big problem with especially the eagles. Came in and they're eating the fish because that's what they eat. And that concentration is going to go from 2 to 25 parts per million. Okay, and it messed with the hardness of their eggs. So baby birds weren't able to be born because their shells weren't hard enough. Okay, Rachel Carson, she wrote a book called Silent Spring where she talked about the impact that we're having on the environment. It's a very controversial book because people don't like to think that we're having a negative impact on nature. So, if you're ever looking for something to read, go ahead and look it up. Threats to biodiversity. Introduced species can be a big threat. Okay, they're invasive species. That's any species that is not native. Okay, and they reproduce rapidly, and they're going to outcompete the natives because typically invasive species are really good at reproducing quickly and aren't as specified to habitat as a native is going to be. So they're going to be able to take advantage of more resources as opposed to if you can only eat one thing, they're going to eat that thing and a lot of other things. So they're going to be able to reproduce more and more and more. Okay, zebra mussels you've probably heard about. Zebra mussels are a really big deal if you go boating or if you have any kind of vehicle that is in the water. There's a lot of regulations, things that you have to do if you visit a lake or an area that is infested with zebra mussels. And these zebra mussels, it's because these zebra mussels are really good hitchhikers. You can see they're hitchhiking inside of a tailpipe here. Okay, and so they'll go up this tailpipe, and then when the person puts their boat or your jet ski or whatever into a lake that's not infested with the zebra mussels, then these zebra mussels are then going to be that pioneer species in there, and man, they are just going to take over. Okay, my favorite thistle, purple loosestrife, those are things that you can see here. Kudzu is one of my favorite. This is not one we see here and hopefully never will. This is a really big problem out east. If you ever go out on the East Coast, you probably have heard about this, or if not, make sure you pay attention to the trees. You'll see like this coating of green stuff over here. It just looks like a blanket of green. Okay, it's a vine plant that grows very quickly, and it grows over everything. So it grows over trees. Well, what's the problem if it grows over a tree? The tree can no longer photosynthesize. Okay, but take a look here. That is a car. And I believe kudzu can cover a car overnight. That's how fast it grows. Okay, so big problem. Alright, other problems, we have ozone depletion. This is going to be when we have, let's see here, our ozone layer, and we get a hole in here. Okay, and what the ozone layer is oh so good at is it lets in sunlight, but it also bounces off quite a bit of UV radiation. Okay, so if you have a hole in that protection, then you're going to allow more radiation in than typically would be let in, and that is going to hit what lives on Earth. So if you live under or near ozone hole, there's going to be an increase in UV radiation. UV radiation is going to affect your DNA. It's going to cause mutations, which can cause cancer. Okay, we talked about this when we talked about skin cancer. It's serious. Wear your sunblock. Okay, global warming. This is, we're talking about, basically a greenhouse effect. I really like this title better. Climate change. Okay, because global warming, people think that all it means is that the Earth is getting warmer. Well, yeah, that's part of it, but we're talking about on a global scale, the temperature increasing by 1 or 2 degrees. Well, maybe that's not such a big deal. Whoop-de-doo, you go from 70 to 71. Okay, but it's actually really a huge deal because we're going to have that uneven warming, remember? We talked about the sun and its effect on biomes. And have uneven warming, you're going to, for example, if you warm up the ocean, you're going to start messing up with the ocean currents. You mess with the ocean currents, then you're going to mess with the climate. Mess with the climate, you're going to get massive, crazy storms like we see now. Ice shelves are melting. That's a big problem if you're a polar bear, because polar bears can swim, okay, but they rely on ice to be able to take breaks. Okay, well, now there's less and less ice, so they're having to do more and more swimming, so there are lots of polar bears that are drowning because they can't swim as far apart as the ice is. Okay, deserts are spreading. All of these things are caused because of global warming. All right, resource management. We have renewable resources. These are resources that can be regenerated or can be replenished, so that would be things like wind power, water power, all those are renewable because we're not using them up. Non-renewable resources, these are resources that either can't be renewed or aren't being renewed fast enough. Okay, so they cannot be replaced. An example would be fossil fuels. So yeah, there are going to be plants and animals that are going to die and create more fossil fuels that are living today, but they're not going to become fossil fuel for millions of years. So sustainable development, then, there's actually lots of forestry projects and protected parks like your state or national parks to responsibly use resources without using them up. There are programs to go in and they mark certain trees. They get a certain percentage of the trees out. That helps keep forest fires down. It also helps people who are loggers to have the wood that they need so we can build houses and all the stuff that we need to do. Okay, no over-exploitation. We're talking about sustainable development. Okay, habitat protection. We try to protect keystone species. I'm sure you've heard about habitat protection before. Just a reminder, keystone species is a species that can crash the ecosystem if they are taken out. Also, habitat protection, there's this thing called the edge effect. Edge effect is you're going to find more life out here on the edge of forests than you are in the open or in the middle of the woodland, because on the edge you're going to have a greater diversity of bushes and of grasses and of trees. You're going to have a greater variety of life there. Edge effect, if you are fragmenting those edges, you are going to also be endangering those animals, because those animals need to be able to have protection further in the forest. So if you fragment the forest, then you're going to end up with lots of unprotected animals. Okay, habitat restoration we talked about. Land resources, I guess I'm going to have to save the rest of this for our next part of notes. Okay, so erosion, you can write this down. There's not really much more that needs to be said about erosion. There's 2 more slides. Okay, you'll just have to pause them and write them, okay? I'm not going to say anything more. And there, this is the last slide. Okay?